Welcome to another episode of the Frustrated CEO podcast. My name is Patrick Lyons. I'm just one of your co-hosts here with my friends, my colleagues, my cohorts, Leb Tannenbaum and Patsy Feeman. Welcome to you both.
Thank you.
Good to be here.
Now, today's episode is organization readiness for growth. And the reason that we are talking about this is something that our team has been working on quite a bit, thinking about, examining pretty in detail for the last several months, working on something that we'll probably talk about as we get toward the end of our episode. But to tee up why or what organization readiness is, why we're talking about it today, I'm going to kick it over to you, Leb, to provide some context to our listener.
Thank you, Patrick. So when we talk to CEOs, one of the biggest questions we hear is, are we ready? You know, it might be, are we ready for a product launch? Are we ready to enter a new market? Are we ready to execute a strategic initiative? And it's an important question. And it's something that might fit into the category of it keeps the CEO up at night. So we're going to just jump into that and give an overview, kind of enter into that conversation. And we're going to follow it up with more in-depth work in other podcasts to follow. Okay, so I'm going to turn it back over to you, Patrick, as we start with the importance in growth for alignment and specifically strategic alignment.
Yes, thank you. So listener, if you followed our podcast for any length of time, you've heard us talk about the role of the critical importance of strategic alignment among your leadership team when we're talking about strategic execution. Today, we're going to look at alignment as a critical component I guess a critical factor in determining organizational readiness. So just to refresh, what are we talking about when we're asking the question, are we aligned? Are we aligned? Are you, listener, are you and your leadership team, are you aligned? Again, for today's episode, are you aligned in a way that supports your readiness for growth? Do you, as a leadership team, have a unified direction? Do you have a common and clear goal? Is there collaborative effort? Is your leadership team collaboratively working, and are their teams collaboratively working together in service of that goal? Is communication between your leadership team clear, consistent? Are teams communicating to understand, not just to express their opinions, to assert themselves? Is your leadership team flexible or inflexible? Flexibility is a huge part of readiness to growth, readiness for growth. And then do you have an aligned way of assessing our performance? Are we working well together? I like to summarize alignment as having a team that is on the same page and pulling in the same direction. Obviously, when those things aren't in play, then growth becomes exponentially more difficult. When you've got leaders that are pulling in opposite directions, when you don't have a clear and common goal, when leaders become inflexible, then you lack alignment. And when you lack alignment, your organization's readiness for growth becomes significantly hampered. And why is it important to call that out? Well, because so often, and we've seen this, so often, a lack of alignment manifests itself in other ways in the organization. So in other words, it might look like silos, right? We've got silos in the organization. And that gets, I think the spotlight goes on the silo and not on the lack of alignment. If you have alignment at the top, the silos break down. Lack of alignment manifests itself in other ways in the business. And so a CEO or an organization decides, they forge ahead, we're going to grow. They think that pushing for growth will help overcome the issues that exist in the organization. When really, if those issues in the organization are from the lack of alignment, then growth becomes, as I said, just growth becomes exponentially more difficult. I'm looking at my colleagues. What are you thinking?
Well, I'm thinking that that's a good intro. It's definitely true. We do sometimes run into that rigidity. Some of those rigidities may be based on belief systems and
Yeah.
beliefs about what we can and can't do, or seeing things differently. And it's not perhaps a culture that's safe enough to cut across the grain and say, I'm going to need to understand this better to really get aligned, or I'm going to need a couple of new hires to be properly resourced. I mean, any of those kinds of things. I
Yeah.
think that's what we're talking about, and I love the way you framed it.
I think about it. Thank you. I think about a specific client that actually I've been working with now for a number of years. And when we started, the catalyst was they were ready to scale and grow. They saw the opportunity. And we started with, as we often do, we started with a culture survey, which can, I think, even by the name culture survey, the sense is it gives you culture data, and it does. But as I was alluding, so many of the issues that were evident in the results of the culture survey really spoke to the lack of alignment at the top. And so, looking at that data, the first thing we did is we put off the growth. I mean, it was like, okay, before we can even talk about taking share, growing the market, new products, new services, before we even talk about that, there are some real issues in the home, right? Like, we've got to fix this leadership team lack of alignment. And we spent probably way more than they thought they were going to need in terms of time and energy and effort to reach that alignment. And when that was done, the growth was an outpouring. The growth was an outcropping of getting that leadership team aligned. And I will tell you that now for 3 consecutive years, they have set new records for annual revenue and annual profitability. And I think it's because we didn't start with growth. We started with alignment. So, all right, that's probably a deep enough dive, because today is just wetting the whistle. And what we've committed to doing, we want to bring back CEOs who excel. In fact, I might even ask the leaders of that business to come back for a future episode and talk about that alignment work. But now let's maybe switch gears and talk about leadership. It's kind of the second of the pillars that we focus a lot on. And again, usually we talk about it in the terms of strategic execution. Today, we're talking about leadership as a catalyst for readiness for growth. Patsy, when I think of leadership, I think Patsy Feeman.
Thanks, Patrick. You know, it is at my heart. So, yes. So to grow your company, whether it's, revenue, a new product, you have to grow your people because you're going into uncharted territory. And growth creates change. So not only are you trying to maintain your current operations, so keep the business running, you're also trying to expand. So leaders at all levels of the organization need new skills and behaviors in order to really understand and embrace where the senior leaders are wanting to take that. So our senior leadership's all aligned. How do we lead ourselves, but also how do we develop the leaders at all levels of the organization so that they can implement that new growth, that change? And what's needed at different levels of the organization is different. You need the alignment, you need the direction, you need the vision, I think, from your senior leaders. But at your mid-level leaders, those are kind of next in line to be your executive leaders. Those people really need to be able to understand the vision, but they also need to be able to translate that vision and the actions needed to the rest of the workforce. Makes me think of a large construction company we've worked with who had a variety of locations in several states and were trying to consolidate so they could all grow and grow equally and collaborate. And the senior leadership was actually well aligned. They had a very clear vision. They assigned, 10 or 12 people to implement that vision, but they didn't give them any skills, any new skills or behaviors or any framework for how they were going to be able to do that. And so consequently, this group of people didn't know how to work together because they were all peers. So that was all new, but they didn't know how to speak about the growth and their readiness for growth. They didn't know how to speak to their people about that. So they defaulted to doing the daily work. And consequently, this huge amount of effort that the senior team had put together fizzled because they didn't have the intermediate leaders in place to carry out the growth, to carry the vision, but also to implement it into the workforce. And it was not only a waste of time, it was really sad to see a vision that was so inspiring to kind of fizzle. So how do you do that? You need everyone, starting with, the senior leaders, to be strong and aligned. You need to invest and support your people. You need to understand, where are we now? Where do we want ourselves to go? And what's that gap? How are we going to get there? And you need to help people see the opportunity for them, for their growth and for their development, and want to embrace that while getting the daily work done. I mean, it's a dance. We got the daily work we've got to do, and we want to expand. I want to expand myself as a leader. I want to expand myself as a team. So how do we do that? And some people can come out of the gates, running a marathon. Some people need to take it a step at a time. As you're talking about being able to assess where are we now, you'll be able to understand at what pace can we take our growth. I mean, I often think of it as probably not the lowest common denominator, but you can't ask your whole team to run if they don't have a pair of running shoes. So we need to make sure people are ready, and we need to accept where we are and develop a plan for moving us to where we want to be.
Reminds me of another client. Again, the early stages of talking about growth and thinking that pushing for growth would be part of the development of the leaders, right? They knew they had a very immature team, not immature psychology wise, more just leadership wise, and thinking, well, they'll it's kind of a sink or swim approach. And sometimes people swim, but there were certainly some that sunk. And so, I guess not having that leadership in place at the start is going to impact your organization readiness for growth.
Right. And I don't know about you, but somehow pushing me isn't much motivation. I tend to dig in my heels.
That's a great point. It's funny. I can think of a very good mid-level manager that I know who loves that. He has specifically said, don't over-educate me. Just give me the outcome and let me go figure it out. But to your point, Patsy, there's the other end of the spectrum where that's not going to work for all people. And leaders need to recognize that. If you push everybody, you're going to lose some.
I mean, the other thing I thought of that I love, Patsy, is just bringing up the notion of leadership at every level. And it reminds me of the first time I ran a marathon. All the elite runners were at the front of the pack. I knew I wasn't an elite runner, so I went to the back of the pack. And it's when I realized they're going to run a very different marathon than I am. And when I translate that to the business world, a lot of times the executive team is in the know, and they've been developing this growth strategy for a while, right? And they're like, okay, we're ready. And the whole rest of the organization's like, ready for what? And they may be in the back of the pack because the leaders at other levels aren't as informed. They aren't as ready. They aren't equipped. But the leaders at the top think they are ready because they've been talking about this for a while, this growth strategy.
Good point. And I also think it's important, because we talk about this frequently, is how do I learn to lead myself first?
Yeah.
So knowing myself, am I at the top of the front of the pack or the bottom of the pack or somewhere in the middle? That's a really important component. how do I lead myself first? That is knowing my strengths, know where I want to take my career. You know, I've worked with people lately who said, I just want to learn how to do what I'm doing better. Can I just do that for the next 3 or 4 years? What's all this promotion stuff about? So that's a lot of good self-knowledge. So how do we lead ourselves first? Then how do we lead our teams? And what you're talking about, Loeb, is good because teams are made up of human beings that all have all different kind of personalities. Some bring great people skills to the table, and some can get stuff done. So, but you need both. And then how do we lead the organization, which I think I'm going to get to shortly around performance. All three of those are different perspectives, but they kind of nest within each other.
That's excellent.
Yeah. So let's talk about performance. Organization performance from the perspective of organization readiness.
I'm going to start with culture, which you mentioned already, Patrick. Culture plays a big role in understanding, really, answering the question, are we ready? I think we've all seen, well, I don't know, whatever sport you might follow, when you can tell that that culture is ready to perform. And there's a whole lot of components that we're talking about. But I want to talk about one company experience where we came in and the company had been stuck on a plateau for 5 years. And the CEO wasn't satisfied. He was frustrated. When we talked about it, I started asking questions about the culture. So we also decided to run a culture survey. And we found two important things. One is that there was a split in the culture between the office and the people who worked kind of undercover in the office and the people who worked in the field. So there were basically two cultures. And another is that for those who worked in the office especially, the culture was really built around comfort. It was around maintaining the status quo. So there wasn't this desire, this kind of burning desire to test myself and see what the next level might look like. And we could have put all kinds of other initiatives and tools into that mindset and that culture, and it probably just wouldn't have made the difference that it needed to make. So understanding your culture, I think, is part of understanding if you really are ready. When the CEO laid out a vision for growth, people started to get interested. So that was a good sign because, again, long term, I want to be in a company, I want to grow myself, or I want to feed my family or whatever the case may be. But the other thing that we then recognized or we bumped up against is there was no playbook. So we started picking it apart, saying, well, grow, why? And when people started to understand the why of why we want to grow, that we've been on this plateau for so long, it's comfortable, but it's not actually a long-term strategy. Then we got into, well, how? Coming off of what Patsy was saying, we asked why and how at different levels of the organization. And then we got into what. So grow why, grow how, grow what. And this led to working together and creating a plan and a playbook. And looking at that, and looking back at that now, 2 years later, they doubled their top line revenue and they achieved a bottom line revenue that was higher than they had ever had in their history. They really weren't ready, but they got ready.
Yeah.
And that's part of, why we're excited to develop this readiness for growth assessment, because there's a lot, that comes to play in being ready to grow. I think, another things are we resourced? Do we have enough data in the pool to understand what the challenges might be? Do we have the right skills in place? Are we up to living our values when we're struggling to get to, or are challenged to, or inspired to get to a higher level? And we have to remember, yes, a lot of that's internal, but the customer and the customer focus is where we really also need to not slip.
Hmm.
And continue to, what does the customer want from us? What's the why of the customer? Why do they do business with us? So there's just so many things about perform, and it was really fun using that example to see people kind of let go of the comfort zone and get excited about the challenge of, can we double in 2 years? Can we triple in 5 years? and it felt different when you walked into that organization. So,
That's great.
given our time frame, I would say, there's a lot more to talk about, but we all know when push comes to shove, we have to be ready to perform.
Yeah.
And that includes alignment, and it includes leadership, and includes leadership at every level. It includes culture. It includes all the other components of performance. And it's a whole lot of fun even to get ready if you are willing to embrace that. We really want to grow.
Leb, as you were talking, here's the analogy that came to mind, right? I know sports analogies are not always the greatest because not everybody understands them, but alignment, the analogy that came to mind is alignment is getting all of your coaching staff on the same page, right? The leadership component is choosing the right team captains, right? The right leaders on the field. And then the performance piece is making sure that the players know their roles and they're excited and they understand, right? And they are well prepared so that they can go out and execute. And if you don't have those three components, you're not ready to go play the game. You're just not ready.
And if you only have one, you might say, okay, we're ready. And you're really not. So
right.
We're bringing up three key categories here.
Yep. Love it. All right. So this was meant to be, as I said, a whistle wetter. I'm just going to make up my own phrase. We're wetting your whistle, wetting your appetite for future conversations, deeper dives into all three of those, into organizational readiness, looking at alignment and the role there. Again, bringing on leaders who excel in that and speak to it. And then also an episode on the leadership piece and the performance piece. So for now, why don't we wrap up with a let's get practical, as we like to do. Leb, Patsy, as you think about even just the brief conversation that we've had today, what are some simple practical steps that a CEO or a senior leader, C-suite leader, executive can take to begin improving their organizational readiness for growth?
One that from your story, Patrick, is with alignment, growth can flow more easily, more readily. And from Leb, playbooks, creating a playbook is an important roadmap, an important and inclusive roadmap for growth and engagement. Know your why, your what, and your how, and co-create those.
Good stuff.
I'll jump in and just say, if you've done the right work to get everybody pulling together and excited only at the executive team level,
right,
you're not ready. So that's one thing. I think another is, if growth means we need to recast our vision and ensure that we're all living our values,
good one.
Right? Then when that is done, you're more ready. It doesn't mean you're totally ready, but you're more ready. And we have seen growth throw people off of living their values for the sake of growth. And ultimately, that's not sustainable, healthy growth. It might be a spurt, but it's not what we're looking for.
That's good. My turn?
Yep.
All right. I'll bring us home. All right. We've talked about this, I think, in all three of these sections. Trying to grow when you're not ready won't fix the issues in the organization. It will expose them. And so it's important to fix those before you embark on, again, it's just making sure you're ready before you're trying to grow. Patsy, you said it eloquently. Investing in leadership is really a precursor to organizational readiness for growth. Love the analogy you use is equip your people to keep up with the senior leadership team, right? And then the last one I'll add is, Lev, you said it, culture plays a big role in organization readiness for growth. So investing in that, again, if it's not having a great culture for the sake of having a great culture, it's having a great culture because that will position you for growth, for readiness for growth. So awesome.
Excellent.
Beautiful. Well, that was fun. Good to see you both again. Thank you. As always, I appreciate your wisdom, your expertise.
Wow, we're almost exactly on time.
I know. Yeah, listen, you don't know this. We were shooting for a 25 to 30-minute episode. So I think we've done it. Listener, you can find this episode's Let's Get Practical on our website, frustratedceo.com, as well as posted to LinkedIn, along with hopefully by now you're following our LinkedIn page, thefrustratedceo.com. The Frustrated CEO on LinkedIn, as well as connecting with Patsy and with Leb and with me on LinkedIn. We would love to connect with you and share more of this content with you. And Leb alluded to it. Last thing I'll say is be on the lookout for a readiness assessment that we are putting the finishing touches on to exactly help you determine your own organization's readiness for growth. When that's available, you'll be able to find that on our website, or hit any one of us up, and we can make sure that gets in your hands. Patsy and Leb, thank you both so much.
Pleasure.
Thank you.
Listener, thank you for sticking with us to the end of another episode of the Frustrated CEO podcast, and we will see you again next time.